Hi. Welcome to Drawn to Music, a series where I will show you my process when creating illustrations inspired by a song. This is going to be the first one of the series, and I've recorded this about 20 times already, so hopefully this one's good. So in this series, I'm going to tell you how I come about creating the image that represents to me a clear interpretation of a song. It could be any song, no matter the genre, I'll draw it. This one was suggested to me by my brother, and it just so happens to be from one of my favorite bands. So the song that we're going to be working on today is going to be Final Embrace by Primal. Alright. It is a very energetic and chaotic song, so that's going to be the vibe that I want to encapsulate. I went to see them live in New York City a while back, but things transpired throughout the night and I had to leave the venue just before they took the stage. So I didn't get to see them. I went to see them. So I went to it, but I didn't get to it. Whenever I have to illustrate a song, I listen to it on repeat for at least half an hour. I have to give myself time to let my mind formulate images based on what I'm listening to. So usually half an hour, a lot of times more. But I listen to it until I have a very solid foundation to the piece that I want to render at the end. I don't read the lyrics though. I don't read the lyrics right away. Even if I know the song, I won't sing along to it. I just listen to it and let the lyrics jump at me more or less. So whatever catches my attention and ignites my imagination, I'll write it down. So for example, one of the things that I wrote here is "Can't ignore my soul is burning," which is part of the chorus. Can't ignore my soul is burning. That one. Which conveyed an image of a warrior burning with rage, the actual fire, lighting this person up, But, I was right, that's a cool idea, but I don't like committing to my first idea right away. I just let it be a catalyst for what's, my mind is going to be doing, imagining new versions of this as the song loops in my ears and in my head. The thumbnails for this piece aren't my best work. They do serve their purpose, so they're good for that. They're good for visualizing ideas and different iterations, but I'll try to make them more legible for the next pieces. Usually they are more legible. It's just I haven't done this in a while, so I'm trying to get you back into the flow of things again. I didn't even remember which water dishes I used for my inks. That's how long I haven't done this. So I was like, what? All right, thumbnails, great. But anyway, as the music keeps on playing, as I'm listening to it, I tried different compositions. I try different thumbnails, doodle different thumbnails here and there in the boxes that I drew. And I keep just playing the song and absorbing whatever piques my interest, all right, that's kind of cool. And I'll make a mental note sometimes. I kind of let the song seep into me, I embody the song maybe sort of, and let it take the wheel, let it guide my hand as I iterate on these thumbnails. And I'll jump around from one to another and revisit a thumbnail along the way if I think that something else could be cool. So they're ever evolving. And as I'm listening to the song, new lyrics catch my attention. I'm feeling so lonely stood out to me, and I thought, well, maybe that could be something. Then it said defenseless. I was like, all right, what about that? Can I do something with that? So I just keep ideas in my head as I try to come up with what image represents the song. And I try different angles, different positions, or different compositions rather, of what is taking place in the scene. I try different ideas, and here and there, as I keep going, and then I keep on paying attention to what else catches my attention. Then I heard, I'm waiting till midnight, and I thought that sounds cool. Maybe I can do something with a clock somewhere, the clock ticking down to midnight. The final fight, but also the final breath, there's a lot of symbology that you can use or attach to the clock imagery, especially accompanied by something like a Grim Reaper, which comes to mind shortly after, because then I heard the part of the song that says, "From the field of the fight, they collect parts of death." So the field of fight already had reinforced my idea of a battle, like a fight happening, like a brawl. And then collecting parts of death, instead of thinking of disembodied parts, I thought of the Grim Reaper. So I figured, all right, let me try to see what would a composition with a Grim Reaper look like, but also keeping in mind the clock. So I try to make them two here, put them together. And I was like, well, what if I take it into a more surreal version of it and maybe have the fight that I'm trying to draw happen on the palm of the Grim Reaper's hand. And I was like, oh, that's a cool idea, but I don't like it. I want the battle to be a bit more prominent on the actual paper, like take more space and be more visceral. So I was like, all right, that's a cool idea, but I want the fight to be a bit bigger, take more space. So I reject the idea and move on. But then I'm like, what if the Grim Reaper, but like looking down at the fight? So this fight can now take a bit more space on the composition and have the Grim Reaper looking down on it, like as if it was like a larger than life creature, or like person. And I was like, all right, that's a cool too, but I still didn't want to go with it. So I kept on iterating a few more times. I drew more, like 2 more versions of what the fight would actually look like, what's happening at the bottom of the page. And I was like, all right, this is kind of cool. I can see where this is going. And then the lyric that pops up to me is like, I will break through their lines. And for some reason, this helped me further visualize, like how I wanted the fight to go. And I pick up the book for the art of Batman, the animated series. And I just start flipping through the pages to see what pops up to me while I'm still listening to the song. And then I come to this page where I see Batman throwing a punch. And I think, oh, this is a cool pose for my composition. I want to have this be part of it. So I make a quick gesture drawing based on that pose and just move on to the next stage, which is me drawing the bigger thumbnail to get closer to the actual paper that I'm going to use at the end. But then I gave it one more thought, right? So this little drawing that's over here, I was like, wait, what about the title of the song? Like it's called The Final Embrace. Should I play around with that idea and like the actual embracing, the act of embracing somebody? So what if the character is holding like a dying friend and that becomes the final embrace? I was like, oh yeah, that's a cool idea, but I still wanted a more chaotic vibe of the song to perpetuate through the drawing. So I wanted to go back to the thought of, of the idea of having a fight being fought in the middle of the paper. So, time for a close-up. I draw this bigger size thumbnail where I get to define some of the details, refine what I want happening here and who the actors are. And, even though this is a thumbnail for the final composition, not everything that I put here always goes to the final product. And you'll realize that there are some elements that get removed from this one, such as this guy in the corner that he's prone shooting towards the fight. And then on the bottom left side, I have a cross being stabbed by a sword. And they were all prompted by different parts of the song and like how I was going to interpret it. But when I get to the bigger paper, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be one-to-one from the thumbnail that I just did. So I move on and I start applying the ink to start making a shadow guide or a shadow map, so I know where the shadows lie in the paper. And I start to define the direction of the lighting, which in this case is coming from the top right corner, because my intention was to show what at the moment during the sketch phase, I thought that this character had a very nice looking, handsome face. I was like, great, let me show this face because he's kind of cute. I don't know, but he looked cool in the sketch. So I was like, yeah, let's show his face, but I want him to be a little bit more like sad or like more in pain. And that was the idea, right? But then somewhere along the line, as you're going to see, when I'm painting with my inks, I completely lose track of how this man's face looks like or should have looked like. And I end up making him look nothing like his sketch version would have alluded to. And I apologize, dude. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do this to you. I still like you though, because you're still a good character and your face still shows some emotion. There's still some pain in your eyes. So no matter how warped your face is, your emotions show true. But yeah, overall though, in spite of that, or regardless of the face being kind of weird, I'm really proud of this piece. I like the composition and the lighting. I like this eagle, the eagle that I have here, because if you know anything about Primal Fear always uses eagles in their iconography, their image. So I figured I had to have an eagle here, and I placed the eagle as beginning without any thought, like without any intended meaning behind its placement or what it meant to it. But then when I looked at it, I was like, wait, what meaning does it break to the narrative? What's going on in this piece now? So to me, it's as if the eagle had come to help the main character, because the main character is praying. It says, pray to the sky, ready to die, So I wanted him to be praying for something to come and help him, whether take him away or some sort of salvation. And then when I saw the eagle where it was, I was like, oh, maybe the eagle is the one that comes to answer his prayers and helps him out in however way it is appropriate for the time, And then I also kept the Grim Reaper here in the back because I felt that I still wanted to, carry that ominous feeling of like death looming, And then I also took the idea of the cross that I had before on the bottom left, and I moved the cross to the back over here on the right side of the composition. And since you have these diagonal shapes or diagonal lines from the silhouette of the buildings, your eye is a little bit led towards the cross, which also highlights the like religious overtones or the undertones, I guess. The religious motifs in the lyrics of the song itself. Like war in the name of our Lord. Yeah, like praying until midnight. All this like religious terminology and like like I said, like kind of vibe in the song. I wanted to keep that in the piece as well, so I added this cross silhouette. I'm pretty proud of the little stories that are happening in the background. There's more characters in the background. There's things happening that you can look at and make your own narrative too. So I like those two, especially these two in the bottom. These are the two friends who are holding each other's hand, or one is holding the other's hand, their final embrace before they passed away. And then if you notice, one of the other details that I wanted to include in here is that after listening to the song, there's a part where he says that I will fight my own fight, I will break through their lines, take my last chance to survive. And also being the part where he says, what's the sense behind this mess? He's not for this conflict, he's very much opposed to it, and he doesn't see the sense of the violence. So with that in mind, I wanted to showcase that in some way. And if you notice, soldiers that are fighting him and around him, they're either wearing hats or helmets. So that's like the two bands, the two teams, the helmets versus the hats. And but he's not wearing any hat or any helmet, because he doesn't identify with either side of the conflict. And so he's just a man. And to further emphasize that point, I ended up having these two dudes here in the bottom left also not have any helmets, because I figured once you're dead, once we're dead, we're all just humans, we're nothing more than humans. So even though during the fight they might have identified with one team or the other, at the end of the day, when they take their last breath, they're just two dead humans. It comes down to that. There's nothing that really separates us beyond our perspectives, In the end, we're just humans. We're very finite and very, very fragile. But that was what led my process, how I came up with the idea of this piece and what some of the elements in it mean to me. Primal Fear's Final Embrace was a very fun song to visualize, heavy with emotional impact. There's a lot to unpack in its lyrics and its mood. The imagery embedded into the song, it's rich with detail, waiting to be discovered. Well, I hope you enjoyed my interpretation of it. But I'm curious to know what meaning you would give to the piece. What's your interpretation? I would love it if you were to write it down in the comments. Thank you so much for staying with me this long. Like I said, I'd love to hear your thoughts on your interpretation, but also if you have feedback on the art, on the video format, whatever, I'm here for all of it. I want to get better at this. And if you want to have a fine art print, like G-Clay print of this piece, you can find the link on the description below. So thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next time. Peace.